without objection, please, sir.
All right, any objection? You objecting, Senator Elliott? All right, hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
35 ayes.
35 ayes, 0 nays. The EBR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 5 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 140 by Senator Gudger regarding the Professional Bail Bonding Board.
Senator Gudger.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a sunset bill, and during the sunset, we have found a lot of different issues with a lot of the different boards, agencies, commissions. And it's one of those things where we're trying to do our due diligence for all of the licensees of the state of Alabama to make sure that they're getting, return on their rate of that they invested to get their license as well. Having said that, we have went through the diligent process of sunset on the bail bondsman. We have made a recommendation for a 1 year and bringing them back. Having said that, I believe my colleague across the way would like to speak a moment on that.
All right, Senator Elliott. Thank you, Mr. President. 1 year, only 1 year. That's a little unusual, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Wonder why?
Probably with significant findings, if I had to guess on that.
I would say so. And Mr. President, members, I'd like to read some of those significant findings that have come from the audit that deal with this particular board. Significant issues. Financial statements of the board, let me make sure I get on the right one. Pardon me. There's a lot of these. Significant issues. 18 payments made out to Smith Warren Management Service were analyzed, and of the 18, 17 invoices were discovered to have been submitted and paid by the board before the services were performed. This violates Alabama's Constitution. Section 93 prohibits the state from lending credit or money to individuals or corporations unless explicitly authorized. Violates fiscal policy. Fiscal Policy and Procedures Manual, Chapter 6, Section 3C explains that the state does not allow payment for goods or services because there is no authorizing statute. However, there are 3 exceptions: prepayment to the federal government, travel advances for Department of Revenue examiners, and advanced travel or prepaid travel expenses. Contracted services are not covered in the exemptions to this policy. Next significant issue. The Department of Examiners of Public Accounts could not verify the accuracy within many of the board's financial statements due to an abundance of discrepancies. Let me just reread that last part. An abundance of discrepancies. Failed to use stars, failed to submit fees collected from licensees and applicants, deposited a license fee into another agency's state treasury fund. Next significant issue. 3 out of 6 board members indicated that the Alabama Professional Bail Bonding Board needed to prioritize handling of the complaints they received. Now, this is a key function of a board, right? Is dealing with the complaints they receive. The board received 1 complaint in 2020, 13 complaints in 2021, and 10 complaints in 2022. These complaints weren't even investigated until March of 2022. Next issue, 11 out of 22 licensees indicated they were not informed of the board's policies, rules, and bylaws. In addition to this, 10 of these licensees also indicated they believe the board does not respond to inquiries in a timely manner. Next significant issue, the board paid contract administrators for administrative services prior to the effective date of 2 emergency contracts. That's a lot of emergencies. The board paid $3,800 in both March and April of 2020 for work contracted for the period of May 4th, 2020 to May 3rd, 2021. The board then paid $5,500 in both May and June 2021 for work contract for the period of July through July 14th, 2021, all the way to July 13th, 2022. Next significant issue, the board issued licensees to applicants without them having completed an examination approved by the board. Isn't that a key function of the board? We've got these exams that you've got to take in order to get the license, but apparently sometimes we just go ahead and issue this a license. You know, that's a direct violation of the Code of Alabama, 1975, Section 1513, 2 217A, which states professional bondsman, professional surety bondsman, or recovery agent commencing business in any judicial circuit in the state on or after June 1st, 2020, shall pass an examination approved by the board and administered by an educational provider approved by the board. Next significant issue, the board adopted administrative rules requiring employees engaged in performance of clerical, investigative, administrative, or other duties of a professional bail bondsman company or professional surety company has a contract with the public to obtain a bail bonds license. The Code of Alabama, 1975, Section 1513, 202A counters this by stating that only individuals that hold themselves out to the public as a professional bail bondsman or professional surety bondsman or operator recovery agent are required to obtain a license from the board. Furthermore, the Alabama Bail Bondsman Regulatory Act does not require those engaging in clerical, investigative, or administrative duties for a professional bond company or professional surety company to obtain a licensure. So we're actually out there that this board and this administrator were saying, you must have a license when the law specifically does not say that you have to.
So they made up their own rules, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then, with the full power of the state of Alabama, went out there and said, you must get a license, go ahead and challenge me. Go ahead and tell me that I don't have to.
The secretaries through this board, from what I've understood, were not supposed to get a license either, but they were made to get a license in this particular board as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me.
Even though that's not in their charge, it's not in their authorizing legislation, they just decided.
So you're telling me they're not really going by the letter of the law? Is that what I'm hearing?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not when they're paying bills, not when they're depositing money into the wrong accounts, not when they're failing to use our procurement methods, not when they're issuing licenses, not when they're conducting examinations. And my question is, if they're not doing any of those things correctly, all of which are key functions in the board, the only key functions of the board, right? Collecting license fees and issuing licenses, going through the education process and making sure that you have that done prior to being licensed, making sure that the money's spent correctly, deposited correctly, goes through the proper procurement process, and then, I don't know, making up a license for somebody that's not supposed to have one. If you're doing all of that wrong, what are you doing right?
And continued education, where they could have spent some extra money back towards that if they had it, which some of them do.
Mr. President, I think it's wise that the Sunset Committee has seen to only reauthorize this board for 1 year. Unfortunately, I think this is one of the shining examples of why we need to move another piece of legislation that deals with these issues. These problems are systemic. We continue to see them year after year, and we need to get a handle on it.
How many boards are there, real quick, Senator, from Baldwin County?
How many boards?
Boards, agencies, commission that we go through, contract review or Sunset in general? 150, is that approximately?
It depends on what you consider a board, and that's one of the things I found out early on. The boards that have licensees that deal with occupational licensing, as we see it, is probably closer to about 65.
About 65, and so having those, there are some good boards out there, right? They're operating correctly, doing what they're supposed to, taking care of the money, putting the money in the right accounts and all of that. Is that correct?
There are.
There's a lot that are not. This is just one of 150.
All those issues I just read were from one board.
Right.
One.
Which is amazing to me, but it's interesting to me that, I was on Facebook the other day and see a post about a bill that died anyway, and that particular bill, was a nemesis, it sounded like, of this particular gentleman's existence for the last year anyway. And so he was kind of making fun of the Senate and making fun of some other things. And it's amazing to me that he's still helping run boards at the same time, making fun of the senators that are trying to help him through the Sunset Committee, which bothers me a little bit. That's just one of the other folks. The other things, when you were doing that, I was pulling up my notes from that Sunset Committee. And some of those things where they were trying to get their license out of suspension, they let people get their license before they completed the requirements to do so, right? So that even happened. Then the administrator was willingly happened to have some funds that were gone without making the board follow the laws. Having said that, there are more and more and more issues with the third-party contracts with the boards, agencies, commissions that aren't doing it by the book and are not following it by the book. Your particular legislation that was in favor of, obviously, and still am, I think needs to make sure that we revamp that, bring that back, and there's, again, 160, 150 that, and this is just of one that you just went through anyway, so I appreciate you coming to the mic and speaking on the behalf of the people that know that this is a good bill that we need to go forward with. This particular sunset bill that I'm handling, because I'm on the sunset, I'm required to help push that through, but it is a 1-year contract, not a 4-year, which we could go up to a 4-year. And then we'll be looking at all of those things very closely in sunset. Now, you're in contract review. You have a lot of those contracts coming up. Is that right?
That is correct, and we'll continue to look at those and scrutinize each one of those as we go through that process.